Hey, everybody. You're about to hear a synopsis of the movie Paid in Full. It's based on a true story. Harlem, 1986. Rich blacks hang out at a burger joint and proudly call it a scene. It's where the ghetto's worthies go. At some point, three friends, Ace, Mitch, and Rico. They sit in gold and argue over $5,000 whether the papers go in the trash or not, and easily part with the money if they lose. Ace found out that his girlfriend, Keisha, had just given birth and was in a good mood to go to his aunt's house, but when the criminal opened the door to the apartment, he was dragged inside. And so Ace, barely alive, is taken away in an ambulance. Just a year ago, Ace worked at a laundromat and got a pittance for it. This is where small-time gangster Calvin, who's dating Ace's sister, comes in. He starts flaunting a 20, saying the workers can keep the change. They're no match for the white death dealers. Ace's buddy Mitch does the same thing. Mitch lives with Ace's sister Keisha and his little brother Sonny. While Ace works hard and delivers clothes to customers, Mitch goes around his dealers. Ace was approached by a major Latino and asked to take his dirty clothes to the laundry. He gave him a hefty tip and introduced himself. His name was Lulu. While Ace settled for change, Mitch rode up to the basketball court on the cool sport bike he'd just bought. A Rolex shines on his arm and a gold chain hangs from his neck. Mitch convinces his friend to join. He'll get both dough and women, but Ace tries to stay away from crime. Calvin also tries to lure the kid on a crooked path, only today he managed to make $800. That's more than the lowlife could ever dream of. So he's got a lot to think about. Ace's mother, Calvin, spit out a couple $100 for her to go shopping and teased the working man again with a wad of cash. Mr. Pete freaks out when he hears gangster rap. That shit ain't gonna sound good in his laundry room. In Lulu's pants pocket, Ace found the dope and kept it. Mitch pulled up to the laundromat in his cars and talked his friend into taking a ride, showing off the neighborhood. At a stoplight, some mod stopped next to him. He started getting bullish and arguing about who was cooler and making more dough than the two of them. Ace went to Lulu's place to give him his drugs. Keep it. As a tip, Lulu threw it to me. It's a small change. Ace is surprised that his new acquaintance is a drug dealer and looks like a decent man. That night he shows his find to Mitch. He's out of the coke business now, too much trouble and the authorities are tight. Mitch was a star at all the parties back then, he was welcome everywhere. Back home at night, Mitch neatly stacked up all his gold, pagers, and sneakers. At the age of 12, Ace won $700 in the lottery. Since then his mom calls him lucky. But the guy himself does not consider himself as such. He is not particularly lucky in life. Mr. Pip told Ace that Calvin got busted for dealing drugs. Now his sister can find a normal guy, but Ace doesn't see it that way. He goes to Calvin's place and offers to buy Torchy's powder for $100. Tip checks it out. His stuff's a lot better than Calvin's. Ace smells money and comes to Lulu. He offers him a kilo of the good stuff for $25,000. It's the best you can find on the market, but 25 points is the street price. Lulu will sell the skills for 18. Ace can make $7,000 on every pound he sells. Lulu gave the rookie dealer a small amount of powder and told him to sell it in 4 days. In front of him, Mitch chased one of his men off the point for taking a shipment away from him. He has to fix the problem. The next night, the movie theater was bursting with spectators who came to see Scarface. This movie then inspired many to start selling on the streets. Meek, on the other hand, was making a mess of things in real life. Together with another shooter, they sent to the other world the thugs who robbed his man. Pretty soon the perp was caught and put behind bars. Mr. Pip found Lulu's powder under the cash register, which was unacceptable, so he threatened to fire him, but Ace was already going to leave to start selling on the street. Especially since the competition was down. Ace got his aunt to go into business. He brought her 2,000 ampoules to be filled with powder. Business began to pick up. Ace was selling a great product at an undervalued price, so soon he was attracting customers. Ace didn't draw attention to himself and didn't try to get on stage, but the dough was flowing. They came to put them in garbage bags, and those were already stored in the bathroom. Mitch didn't live quietly in prison. They were preparing to attack him, but a hound named Rico helped Mitch out and cut up the convicts. He knew what Mitch was doing on the outside, and it was good for him to have a friend like that. Ace has to go to the club to make acquaintances and solve business issues, but Keisha is jealous because there are always some girls hanging around him. Ace tries to cheer up his friend with a roll of bucks, but the girl claims that she meets him not because of money, but because she likes him. One day Ace is approached by two suspicious types on the street and asked to sell them dope. The dealer flipped out and said he had nothing to do with it. They were probably cops. Ace brought Lulu another bag of money, but found his supplier on the floor with his throat slit. The guy found diamonds and a bunch of merchandise at his house. To avert suspicion and make new connections, Ace brought the dough and some of the diamonds to other Latin American gangsters, familiar with Lulu, and offered to do business with them. You can play the box or go to jail, but business never stops. Soon Rika is released from prison. He rides around the neighborhood on a cool racing motorcycle and offers to solve problems for Ace if he needs to. Mitch was cleared of murder charges and was also released. He's greeted by his fraternity and loved ones, and he wonders how his humble friend managed to rise. Also now wearing gold and a Rolex. Ace gave Mitch a red convertible. It's time for him to brag about his success. Mitch wants to bring Rick into the business so that his new buddy can get a head start and make some money. Rick himself dreams of expanding and moving to DC, where there's more money to be made, but Ace doesn't like the idea. He wants to stay home, as it was said earlier. In the evenings, the successful brothers and their women hang out on the stage, and Calvin, who was also finally released from prison, arrives here. He, too, is surprised that the humble guy is holding down all of Harlem. Now he has to beg the authority figure to get him a job, and the criminal demands that Calvin not call him kid anymore. He's Ace. Sometimes you have to use force. Some dumbass started dealing at one of Ace's spots, and he couldn't explain his stupidity. Rico told him to turn around and put a bullet in his ass. The ferocious gunman promises Ace that he'll take down anyone who gets in the way. As time went on, Rico started to pull the blanket over him, and Ace was approached again by that strange shaggy-haired guy and started asking about business. He's definitely a cop. He can't be pulled into the family. At the club, Ace asked Rick not to draw too much attention to himself because he was used to doing his business quietly, but this scumbag was always drinking and partying, and right now he had his home video on the TV. He was having fun with some chick. Calvin comes up to Ace and complains about being manhandled. He wants to sell on the block, unsupervised, and he doesn't like being held by the balls. But that's Ace's rule, safety first. Rika entered the argument, not liking that the six were rebelling. Calvin left the club threatening his boss. At home, Ace was waiting for Keisha with a big belly. It won't be long before she gives birth to a baby. Here Mitch caught his Uncle Ace at home, who made a scandal and did not let his relatives sleep. The gangster demands that the freeloader no longer bothers the family, especially since he hired him for the job, and he is still not on the dot. However, Ace let himself say some nasty things and Mitch took his keys and pushed him out of the house. He promised Sanaa that asshole wouldn't come back. The main trio was doing great, inviting famous rappers to the club and throwing money around. And so we come to the night that started this story. Ace was being beaten up in his aunt's apartment by two thugs with stockings on their faces. A third man held his aunt and sister at gunpoint. Both women were tied up and thrown on the bed. The one in charge was Calvin. He smashed Ace's face and made him open the safe. He shot next to the captives to make Ace realize it was serious. The guy's eyes flooded with blood and he asked to go wash up. In the bathroom, Ace heard swearing and gunshots and started to resist. A bullet flew near his face, but a second one was fired directly into his head. The gangster was left for dead on the floor. Before passing out, he saw that his aunt and sister had been executed. Ace was born a second time that day, along with his daughter. A junkie wanted to buy some dope, but Ricky didn't have time for that and started making jokes about how much fun Calvin had that night. Rick's mind went crazy, so he dragged the junkie out of the car, beat him up, and made him strip down to his underwear. He ran home like that. Ace was on the verge of death, so he's not going to take any more chances and he's out of the game. Rika decided to cheer up his friend and gave him Calvin's chain. The fighter had already dealt with the creep and there was no need to be afraid of him anymore. Ace wasn't happy because now the cops would come to him first. Rika is overreacting again. Ace asks his friends to think about going into the shadows, but Mitch is used to living a successful life and being a favorite on stage. As long as he's making dough, he's living and he doesn't need another life. Suddenly Mitch got a call from his mom. Sonny was kidnapped and left a note demanding a ransom payment of $500,000. He only had $125,000 in cash on hand, so he asked Ace for help. In the morning, the kidnappers sent his brother's severed finger in an envelope. The bandit doesn't know if Sonny is still alive or not. Ace got some of the money, the rest he brought in the form of coke. 14 kilos of which now need to be driven as fast as possible. Mitch took the bag with the money and promised his friend that he would let him know when he knew something. The next day, Ace went to Keisha's house and found his girlfriend in tears. He thought they had found Sonny, but they found Mitch's body with a gunshot wound to the head. Ace remembers Mitch saying that night that he was going to go to Rick's. We'll find out what happened then. Rick has always convinced his friend that he would do anything for him, but when he found out he had 14 kilos of merchandise and a lot of cash in his bag, he just pulled out a gun and shot his friend in cold blood. Ace meets him on the basketball court. He asks the scumbag what's wrong with his face. Mitch managed to scratch him before he died. Rika pretends not to understand what Ace is implying, but admits that he has the coke now. Ace asks him to sell all the stuff, since the ransom still needs to be paid and he'll set him up with his suppliers for it. Rika believes Ace is just trying to get out of the game, but the cunning businessman has it all figured out. He set Rick up with a shaggy-haired guy he always suspected of being a cop. He turns out to be an FBI agent. During the arrest, Rick wounded the agent, but was still captured by the police. Ace knows what he did was wrong, but he doesn't care. Foolish Rika confesses to everything, but he's brave and confident that he'll still be king when he gets out. Eventually, Rika was released 24 years later. In 2015. Because he turned in all his associates and died in obscurity at 21. Then there were a few more phone calls about Sonny. Eventually, the police solved the boy's case. He was kidnapped by his own Uncle Ice and his accomplice. When he couldn't get a ransom, he just killed his nephew. The gang continues to hang out on stage. The old players have been replaced by new ones. Ace was able to get out of the game thanks to Lulu's diamonds. He got into hip-hop and producing. He spent the next few years trying to keep America's youth safe from drugs.